Archangel Michael says, the next chapter of your life is about to begin, not through some dramatic, instant transformation arriving out of nowhere, but through the natural, if often uncomfortable, process of one meaningful period gradually giving way to another, as it eventually does for everyone who continues genuinely engaging with their own ongoing growth and life circumstances. Stay with this message. Something in your life has likely felt like it is shifting recently, even if you have not yet fully named or understood exactly what that shift involves. This message exists to help you recognize this particular transition more clearly, offering honest reflection rather than vague, dramatic promise disconnected from your actual, lived experience and circumstances. Breathe slowly. Let your body settle into stillness. Whatever has filled your attention recently, set it aside for these next several minutes, because what follows deserves genuine presence rather than the passing, distracted engagement most content receives during an ordinary day. Beginning a new chapter typically means a specific, identifiable period of your life, characterized by certain circumstances, relationships, priorities, or ways of understanding yourself, gradually giving way to something different, sometimes through deliberate, chosen change, sometimes through circumstances beyond your direct control, but nearly always through a process that unfolds over time rather than through one single, isolated, instantaneous moment of complete transformation. Reflect honestly on what specific area of your life has felt like it might be shifting recently, the area this particular message is most directly speaking to. Perhaps your career or sense of professional purpose, feeling different than it once did, whether through genuine growth, accumulated dissatisfaction, or simply changing circumstances that have shifted what feels meaningful and fulfilling to you now compared to earlier periods of your working life. Perhaps a significant relationship, evolving in ways that feel both natural and somewhat disorienting, requiring adjustment and renegotiation as both you and the other person continue changing and growing over time. Take genuine time with this reflection rather than settling immediately for whatever area first comes to mind. Sometimes multiple areas are simultaneously involved in this kind of significant transition, connected to one another in ways that only become clear through patient, honest reflection rather than quick, surface-level consideration. If several areas resonate with your own experience, consider whether they might share some common underlying thread, a shift in values, priorities, or self-understanding that touches multiple areas of your life simultaneously rather than remaining contained to just one isolated circumstance. Perhaps your own sense of identity and self-understanding is shifting as you continue learning more about yourself through ongoing experience, no longer fitting quite as comfortably into whatever roles, expectations, or self-concepts previously felt entirely accurate and complete. Perhaps simply a general, harder-to-name sense that something is different now compared to how it felt even a year ago, evidence of gradual, cumulative change that has been building beneath conscious awareness before finally becoming visible enough to prompt this particular reflection. Whatever specific area arose as you considered these possibilities, hold it clearly in mind as you continue through this reflection, because this particular area is likely where your own next chapter is most directly beginning to take shape. Notice, too, whether this particular area has felt connected to any recurring dreams, unexpected emotional reactions, or persistent thoughts that seem to arise without clear, obvious explanation. These kinds of signals often accompany periods of significant transition, your deeper awareness attempting to communicate something your conscious mind has not yet fully articulated or named. If any of these signals have felt present recently, consider them additional confirmation that this particular area genuinely deserves the attention this reflection is currently inviting you to bring toward it. Life rarely organizes itself into neat, clearly demarcated sections the way stories in books often do. Instead, One period gradually blends into the next, with specific moments of clarity, like this particular reflection, sometimes helping crystallize and name a shift that has actually been developing gradually over an extended period, well before that particular moment of naming and recognition finally occurred. Picture how gradually a season actually changes, despite how clearly distinct summer and winter eventually feel once fully established. The specific day when autumn officially begins rarely matches the day when the air genuinely starts feeling different, since that change had already been developing gradually for some time before it became clearly, unmistakably noticeable. Your own current life transition likely follows this same pattern, already underway for some time before reaching the point where it finally becomes clear and nameable, as this particular reflection may be helping it become right now. This means the beginning of your next chapter, whatever specific form it eventually takes, is likely not a single future event you are waiting to arrive, but rather a process already quietly underway, becoming increasingly visible as circumstances continue to unfold and develop. Consider what evidence of this already underway process you can identify in your own recent experience, specific small shifts, conversations, decisions, or internal realizations that, viewed together, suggest a genuine transition already in motion rather than something still entirely in the future. Try, if you are able, to trace this evidence back somewhat further than you initially might, considering not only the most recent weeks but perhaps the last several months as well. Sometimes the earliest signs of a genuine transition are easy to overlook precisely because they appeared so gradually, so gently, that no single moment stood out as clearly significant on its own, even though the cumulative pattern, viewed retrospectively, reveals a genuine, ongoing process that has actually been developing for considerably longer than initially apparent. Beginning a new chapter typically requires releasing something from the previous chapter, a specific role, relationship dynamic, daily routine, or way of understanding yourself that served genuine purpose during that earlier period but that no longer fully fits who you are becoming or where your life is currently heading. This releasing process rarely feels entirely comfortable while it is actually occurring, even when the eventual new chapter proves genuinely positive and fulfilling. Consider what specifically you may currently be releasing as part of this particular transition, whether a specific belief about what your life should look like, a specific relationship dynamic that no longer serves either party well, or simply a familiar, comfortable identity that, while genuinely comfortable, no longer feels entirely accurate or complete given how you have continued growing and changing. Notice, too, whether you have been actively resisting this releasing process, perhaps clinging more tightly than usual to whatever specifically feels threatened by this transition, or repeatedly returning to old patterns even after recognizing they no longer genuinely serve you. This kind of resistance is entirely normal, reflecting the genuine difficulty of releasing something familiar, but naming it honestly can help you approach it with more conscious awareness rather than continuing to operate from it unconsciously, without full recognition of what is actually happening beneath the surface of your current experience. Fear of the unknown often accompanies this kind of significant life transition, worth examining honestly rather than allowing it to operate silently in the background of your ongoing experience. Not knowing exactly what this next chapter will actually involve or how it will ultimately unfold. Fear of loss, releasing something familiar even when that familiar thing no longer genuinely serves you well. Fear of failure, worrying that whatever new direction this next chapter takes will not prove successful or fulfilling in the way you genuinely hope it will. Reflect honestly on which of these fears, or perhaps some combination, feels most relevant to your own particular experience of this current transition. Naming this fear clearly, rather than experiencing it only as vague, undifferentiated anxiety, tends to make it significantly more workable, allowing genuine examination rather than simply continuing to be controlled by its diffuse presence operating quietly in the background of your ongoing experience and decision-making. Ask yourself, honestly, what specifically feels most threatening about this particular transition, examining whether that specific concern reflects genuine, realistic risk, or whether it reflects anxious imagination generating worst-case scenarios without adequate grounding in actual probability or precedent from your own life experience. Ask yourself, too, whether you would genuinely be unable to handle whatever difficulty this particular transition might involve, given everything you have already survived and navigated throughout your life up to this point. Most people, examining this question honestly, discover they possess significantly more resilience and capability than their anxious fear typically credits them with, evidence drawn directly from their own accumulated life experience rather than theoretical reassurance offered without genuine grounding in personal history and demonstrated capability. Genuine, healthy transitions typically benefit from conscious participation, deliberate reflection, and intentional choice, rather than being left entirely to unfold unconsciously without any deliberate attention or engagement from the person actually living through them. Consider what it would mean to actively participate in whatever transition is currently underway in your own particular life, rather than either resisting it entirely, clinging tightly to the previous chapter despite genuine evidence that it no longer fully fits, or passively drifting through it without any deliberate reflection or intentional choice regarding how you want this next chapter to actually unfold and take shape moving forward. Even genuinely positive transitions typically involve some degree of loss, releasing a familiar chapter, however imperfect it may have been, in favor of something new and not yet fully known or understood. Consider whether you have allowed yourself genuine space to grieve whatever specifically is being released as part of this particular transition, rather than rushing past that grief in favor of exclusively focusing on whatever excitement or hope the new chapter might also genuinely hold. Both grief and hope can coexist honestly within the same transitional experience, and allowing genuine space for both tends to produce a more complete, more honest engagement with this particular period than forcing yourself toward either exclusive grief or exclusive, forced positivity that does not accurately reflect your complete, honest experience of this particular transition. Unrealistic expectations regarding how quickly significant life transitions typically develop often lead to unnecessary discouragement and frustration. Genuine, significant transitions typically unfold gradually over months or sometimes years, rather than completing themselves entirely within a few weeks despite even genuinely committed, intentional engagement with the process. This does not mean immediate engagement does not matter, or that meaningful movement cannot begin right away through whatever small, deliberate steps feel relevant to your particular situation. It simply means holding realistic expectations about the actual timeline this kind of significant transition typically requires, celebrating genuine, incremental progress along the way rather than expecting complete, finished transformation within an unreasonably compressed timeframe that most genuine, significant life transitions simply do not follow, regardless of how genuinely committed and engaged you remain throughout the process. Attempting significant life transitions entirely alone, without any external support or resources, often proves considerably more difficult than necessary. Consider who in your life might serve as a valuable source of perspective and encouragement as you continue navigating this particular chapter transition, someone capable of offering genuine, non-judgmental presence as you work through whatever specific challenges and uncertainties this transition genuinely involves. If professional support feels relevant to your particular situation, whether therapeutic support for processing significant change, career coaching for professional transitions, or other appropriate professional resources, consider this a legitimate and valuable part of navigating this transition well, rather than viewing it as somehow separate from or less significant than purely personal effort and determination alone. Significant life transitions rarely occur in complete isolation, disconnected from everything that came before them. Consider how this particular transition connects to your broader life story, what earlier experiences, choices, and periods of growth may have been quietly preparing you for exactly this kind of shift, even if you were not consciously aware of that preparation while it was actually occurring. This kind of reflection can help you approach this current transition with greater confidence and continuity, recognizing it as a genuine continuation of your ongoing life story rather than something entirely disconnected from everything you have already lived, learned, and become throughout your life up until this particular moment. Doubt likely has arisen at some point during this reflection, questioning whether this message's central claim genuinely applies to your own specific situation, or whether it simply represents generic spiritual encouragement offered broadly without genuine connection to your particular circumstances. This doubt deserves honest acknowledgement rather than automatic dismissal, though it also deserves genuine examination rather than uncritical acceptance as necessarily representing the complete truth of the matter. Consider whether your own doubt reflects genuine, careful evaluation concluding that no significant transition genuinely applies to your current circumstances, or whether it reflects something else, perhaps discomfort with the genuine uncertainty this kind of transition inevitably involves, manifesting specifically as skepticism toward the message itself rather than genuine, honest engagement with whatever transition might actually be underway within your own particular life and circumstances. Consider what you genuinely hope this next chapter might involve, holding this hope honestly alongside whatever genuine uncertainty remains regarding exactly how it will actually unfold in practice. This does not require forcing false certainty about outcomes that remain genuinely unknown. It simply invites genuine reflection on your own hopes and intentions for this particular period, allowing that reflection to inform your continued choices and engagement moving forward, rather than approaching this transition entirely passively, without any conscious sense of what you genuinely hope it might ultimately involve and become. Holding too tightly to one particular vision of exactly what this next chapter must look like can sometimes prevent you from recognizing and embracing whatever genuine positive development actually emerges, particularly when it differs somewhat from your original, specific expectation. Genuine transitions often unfold in ways that ultimately prove more fitting and beneficial than the original, specific vision could have anticipated, even though this recognition typically only becomes clear in retrospect, once the transition has had sufficient time to unfold and prove itself through actual, lived experience. Consider what it would mean to hold your hopes for this next chapter with genuine openness, allowing for the possibility that its actual form might differ somewhat from your current expectation while still genuinely honoring and pursuing what matters most to you throughout this particular period of transition and change. Patience throughout this transitional process differs from passive resignation that simply waits without any genuine, ongoing engagement or intentional participation. Genuine patience continues taking meaningful action, however small, while releasing excessive anxiety about controlling the exact timing and specific form of whatever eventually develops. Passive resignation, by contrast, essentially disengages entirely, going through daily motions without genuine hope or intentional participation in shaping how this particular transition actually continues to unfold. Consider which of these two states more accurately describes your own current approach to this particular transitional period. If your current experience feels closer to passive resignation, this message is encouraging a gentle shift back toward more genuine, engaged patience, continuing whatever meaningful action feels appropriate while releasing excessive need to control precisely when and how this next chapter fully develops and takes its ultimate shape. Writing about significant change often helps clarify understanding in ways that purely internal reflection alone sometimes fails to achieve as effectively. Consider whether keeping some form of written record throughout this transition might genuinely support your continued engagement, capturing specific thoughts, feelings, and developments as they occur rather than relying purely on memory to preserve and integrate this particular period's genuine significance and meaning. This record does not need to be elaborate or particularly formal. Even brief, occasional notes, capturing specific moments of clarity or difficulty as they arise, can offer valuable evidence later, allowing you to look back with genuine understanding at how this particular chapter transition actually unfolded, evidence that can prove considerably harder to fully access through memory alone without this kind of ongoing, deliberate documentation. Significant life transitions, like most meaningful, sustained processes, benefit considerably from genuine acknowledgement of incremental development rather than exclusively focusing on the more distant, complete resolution that remains the ultimate outcome. Consider what specific markers of progress might already exist within your own particular transition, even if the overall process remains genuinely incomplete and still actively unfolding. Acknowledging these markers, rather than dismissing them as insufficient compared to the larger, more distant goal of a fully developed next chapter, tends to sustain motivation and genuine engagement considerably more effectively than exclusively focusing on how much remains yet to unfold before this particular transition eventually reaches its own natural completion and resolution. Consider the specific role that physical and emotional well-being plays throughout this transitional period, since significant life transitions often demand more energy and resilience than ordinary daily life, meaning adequate rest, nourishment, and emotional support genuinely matter more during this particular time than they might during more stable, settled periods of your life. If your own well-being has been neglected recently amid the energy this transition genuinely requires, consider prioritizing renewed attention to these basic foundations, recognizing that sustainable engagement with significant transition typically requires this kind of underlying support. Reflect, too, on what specific role your current environment plays in either supporting or complicating this transition, since physical space, daily routines, and social surroundings all genuinely influence how smoothly significant change tends to unfold. Consider whether any specific adjustments to your current environment might genuinely support this particular transition more effectively, whether reorganizing physical space to reflect who you are becoming, adjusting daily routines to better support your emerging priorities, or spending more intentional time with people who genuinely understand and support the direction this next chapter appears to be taking. Examine what specific relationship exists between this current transition and your relationship with uncertainty more broadly, since some people navigate uncertainty relatively comfortably while others find it consistently more challenging, often connected to earlier life experiences that shape their overall relationship with unpredictability and change. If uncertainty feels particularly difficult for you personally, this awareness itself can help you approach this particular transition with appropriate self-compassion, recognizing that your particular difficulty with uncertainty reflects genuine, understandable history rather than any kind of personal failing or weakness. Consider, as well, what specific role your own values play in guiding this transition, since periods of significant change often benefit considerably from returning to core, foundational values as a kind of compass, helping guide specific decisions even when the overall path forward remains genuinely unclear in its complete, eventual form. Reflect on what values feel most important to you as you navigate this particular period, allowing those values to inform specific choices and directions even amid whatever genuine uncertainty continues to exist regarding the transition's ultimate outcome and eventual shape. Explore, too, what specific role spiritual or philosophical practice might play in supporting your continued navigation of this transition, whether prayer, meditation, or simply consistent reflection connected to whatever framework genuinely resonates with your own particular worldview and understanding. Many people find that periods of significant transition naturally deepen their spiritual or philosophical engagement, precisely because these periods tend to surface exactly the kind of larger questions about meaning, purpose, and direction that spiritual and philosophical practice has traditionally helped people navigate throughout human history and experience. This next chapter, whatever specific form it ultimately takes, is not something happening entirely to you, disconnected from your own genuine agency and participation. It is, at least in significant part, something you continue actively co-creating through your own choices, reflections, and engagement throughout this particular transitional period, rather than something purely predetermined that will simply unfold regardless of your own genuine involvement and intentional participation. Release whatever anxiety might have accumulated regarding the genuine uncertainty this particular transition inevitably involves. Uncertainty does not indicate that something has gone wrong. It simply reflects the genuine, honest nature of significant transition, which rarely offers complete certainty about outcomes until sufficient time has passed to allow that certainty to develop naturally through continued, lived experience. Approach this moment instead with genuine self-compassion, recognizing that uncertainty during periods of significant transition is an extremely common, entirely normal human experience, alongside genuine readiness to continue engaging actively and intentionally with whatever this next chapter ultimately involves and continues to reveal over time. Before this message reaches its true close, take one final moment for yourself, genuinely absorbing what has emerged throughout this reflection rather than rushing immediately toward whatever comes next in your day. Name, specifically, the area of your life where this particular transition feels most present and active right now. Name, specifically, one small, concrete way you might actively engage with this transition today or within the next few days, rather than continuing to experience it purely passively, without any deliberate, intentional participation on your own part. This does not need to feel dramatic or overwhelming in order to matter significantly. It simply needs to feel genuine, honest engagement with whatever this reflection has helped illuminate, rather than either dismissing this content entirely or forcing artificial certainty about outcomes that genuinely remain uncertain from where you currently stand within this ongoing process. Trust that this particular message reached you today for a genuine reason, connecting specifically to something real currently unfolding within your own actual life, rather than arriving randomly or without genuine relevance to your particular circumstances. Something in you recognized enough significance to continue reading this far, past the point where you might have closed this message earlier had it genuinely carried no connection to anything real and meaningful currently present within your own life and circumstances. Consider, too, what it might mean to continue checking in with yourself over the coming weeks and months regarding this particular transition, recognizing that genuine, significant chapter transitions typically require sustained attention and reflection well beyond this single initial moment of recognition and consideration. Perhaps setting aside time periodically, weekly or monthly, to honestly assess how this particular transition continues unfolding, what new developments have emerged, what continued adjustment or reflection feels genuinely relevant as circumstances continue to develop and change over time. Reflect, as well, on how you will handle the inevitable moments of doubt or difficulty that are likely to arise as this transition continues unfolding, moments when the clarity or hope you feel right now begins to feel more distant or uncertain amid the ordinary demands and genuine complications of daily life. These moments of doubt do not indicate that your original recognition of this transition was somehow mistaken. They simply reflect the natural fluctuation that accompanies any genuine process of significant change, particularly during its middle stages, before the fuller shape of the new chapter has become clearly visible and established. When these moments of doubt eventually arise, consider returning to this specific reflection, rereading whatever sections felt most significant during this initial encounter, allowing the content to reinforce your original recognition and continued engagement even as its initial emotional intensity has naturally softened somewhat with the passage of time. Consider, too, reaching out to whatever support person you have identified, sharing the specific doubt currently being experienced rather than allowing it to operate silently, potentially derailing your continued engagement without ever being brought into open, honest conversation with someone who might offer valuable perspective or encouragement throughout this particular period. Consider what specific obstacles are most likely to arise as this transition continues unfolding over the coming months, obstacles worth anticipating now rather than being caught entirely unprepared when they eventually arise. Practical complications that make continued adjustment more difficult than it seemed during this initial moment of recognition and reflection. Specific relationships that may struggle to adjust to whatever changes this transition eventually brings. Whatever specific obstacle feels most likely for your own particular situation, briefly considering in advance how you might respond to it can help you navigate it more effectively when it actually arises, rather than being caught entirely unprepared by a difficulty you had not previously considered throughout your ongoing process of transition and adjustment. Think about what genuine progress will actually look like over the coming months, recognizing that significant life transitions rarely resolve completely within a single reflection or even a single season of focused attention. Progress more often looks like continued, gradual development, small shifts accumulating slowly over time, rather than one dramatic, complete transformation occurring all at once within a compressed, easily identifiable timeframe that most genuine, significant transitions simply do not follow. Consider, finally, what it would mean to trust this particular process, even without complete certainty about its exact eventual outcome, recognizing that genuine, significant life transitions rarely require complete certainty in order to unfold successfully. Trust here does not mean passive certainty that everything will resolve exactly as hoped, without any need for continued reflection, effort, or intentional engagement on your part. It means a kind of active, engaged trust, continuing to participate genuinely and intentionally in whatever this next chapter continues to reveal, while also releasing the exhausting need for complete certainty about every detail of exactly how and when this particular transition will fully complete and resolve into its ultimate, settled form. This message reached you today for a reason. Trust that. Carry it with you. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone told you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know what that step is. Thank you for receiving this message today. Be gentle with yourself as you continue engaging with whatever next chapter is beginning to unfold in your life, one honest, deliberate step at a time.